EU's top court bans wearing the hijab at work? It's not so simple. The European Union's top court ruled that companies within the EU can enforce that Muslim employees refrain from wearing the headscarf. The decision was made on the basis that companies may only ban employees from wearing Islamic headscarves if required to project an image of neutrality to clients. The court's ruling mentioned previous cases where two separate Muslim women in Germany were let go from their jobs after they began wearing headscarves at work. This has been described as non-discriminatory because, according to the court, quote, a prohibition on wearing any visible form of expression of political, philosophical, or religious beliefs in the workplace may be justified by the employer's need to present a neutral image towards customers or prevent social disputes. This ruling was met with heavy resentment from amongst the religious population. So this was a big controversy in the last week that I wanted to cover because as someone in the live chat before we got started, they said, please get the title straight. It's not like this. Don't follow the Times scandalistic title. And clarified. So, well, first of all, I want to say that we have a character max and we can't, put all the specificities in the title. But there was a lot of reporting about this just being an across-the-board hijab ban when it's not a hijab ban. It's a ban on political, philosophical, or religious beliefs or things that display that in the workplace. And it's not even a full ban. It's the employers are allowed to use their discretion to not allow that in their workplace should they so choose.
Yeah, so a lot of people have this anti-hijab ban or for hijab ban position without looking at the context. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, are you against hijab ban or are you for it? I'm like, well, it really depends. Are we talking about religious discrimination or religious privilege? Okay. That's, to me, what the standards should be, in my opinion, is consistency, right? If certain if it is allowed legally for private companies to ban any political, philosophical, or religious, which is actually part of the philosophical symbolism in the workplace, like if everybody is expected to have neutrality, right? And you expect that from other people not to have any political symbols or any ideological affiliations at work. Like you can't have a pin that says, like, I don't know, I'm vegan or something, right? If you have that standard, if that is allowed for private companies to do, and now all of a sudden religious people get away with a different set of rules that they get to do something that other people's don't, this is not a form of, and if you remove that, this is not a form of religious discrimination. This is a form of removing religious privilege, okay? However, you have to be careful about this, okay? Because sometimes some people act like they're removing religious privilege, but the actual intention and the actual goal behind it is religious discrimination. They were like, they had no problem or issues with people using symbols, philosophical, political symbols beforehand, until hijabi women showed up and they're like, okay, now we're going to be like, no, you can't have any religious, or like, okay, we know what you're doing here. Okay, this is an actual form of religious discrimination. You're acting like you're worried about religious privilege. However, if you can show, in my opinion, that this is not actually about discriminating, this is not about hijabi people. This is about everybody. Okay, you don't your religious beliefs does not give you the authority to have different set of rules than other people. Okay, and again, so you making this about hijab, this is not about hijab. This is about every religious symbol or any political symbol or any philosophical alignment that you might have. Okay, so you're not special. You're not different than other people. Okay, and if you have if somebody says, okay, fine, This is not about this rule is about everybody. It's not just about the hijabi people. It's still a nonsense rule. Okay, private companies shouldn't be able to tell you not to advertise or not to have any philosophical, political, or religious symbols while you're working. Okay, if you think that, then that complaint is a completely different complaint than accusing them of religious discrimination. Okay, that's a different thing. You could be like, okay, this is a liberty situation for me. I think people should be able to have, advertise their political or philosophical or religious alignment at work. Then, okay, if you have that complaint, please understand that the accusation right now is religious discrimination, and that's a much bigger, allegation than what you're seeming like the problem is. And if that is the problem, why is it that only when hijabi women are all of a sudden the issue, all of a sudden the unfairness of this kind of standards comes into play? Again, this to me shows another form of religious privilege. Okay, it is not religious discrimination. This is actually the fact that this gets this much of an attention when it comes to hijabi women shows to me that this is not an example of religious discrimination. This is an actual example of religious privilege. Okay, maybe there are some secret things behind the background that I don't know, that this is actually about discrimination. If that's the case, if somebody shows up like, no, Armin, this is people are being like fear mongering, oh, hijabi women are gonna get your culture or whatever, this is actually that, and it's just being disguised as something like that. If that's the case, then I'm against it. Okay, again, the intention behind it is what matters. But also, if your issue is that governments shouldn't that private companies shouldn't be able to tell their employees to be neutral at work, right? Then you have to understand that you're taking this is not a fight for liberty. Okay, you're actually taking an anti-liberty stance. Okay. This might be confusing to people. You're like, how is this anti-liberty if a private company, if people get to choose whatever they want to wear at work? It's anti-liberty because you're on the side of liberty if you tell governments can't dictate what people should be wearing, right? Like, for example, in Iran, when governments dictate that women should be wearing hijab, that's anti-liberty, okay? But if you say private companies can't dictate what people wear at work, you're not fighting for liberty. You're actually anti-liberty, okay? Because it's one thing for people, for government not to be able to tell people what to wear in public, okay? But if all of a sudden what is required for you to tell private companies not being able to tell employees what to wear or wear at their work, that would involve the government stepping in and forcing private companies on how to come up with their workplace standards. Okay, that's not a for liberty position. That's an anti-liberty position. When you are getting, the government intervening with how companies operate. I'm not saying that makes it a good or bad thing, but I'm just saying like you have to understand. You don't need liberty at all. Like when governments introduce, I don't know, standards on how much pollution a company can produce, that's anti-liberty, but that doesn't make it bad. That could be a good thing, right? You need regulations, right? But I'm just saying that don't pretend that you're fighting for liberty if you are saying that the governments should force private companies not to have certain standards for how their employees dress at their workplace. Anyway, Sus.
It's kind of interesting, the background from this. So they involve two cases that went all the way through the courts and then up the European Union courts, which were originating in Germany. 2 women, 2 separate cases. And they involved situations where one woman worked at a kind of like a special needs child care center run by a charity. And one woman worked as a cashier at a drugstore chain. And they involved situations where I've heard different reports. So when they were interviewed, they did not wear the hijab, and then when they showed up for work, they started wearing it, or they didn't wear it for a period of time, and then after they had children and came back from maternity leave, that's when they started wearing it, and when these issues came about, which I thought was very interesting. This idea of like them appearing for an interview one way and then showing up another way, and so that's why part of their argument for discrimination. And they, I don't know what to think though, because this is all about like a mandate for neutrality. Like, and I think this is obviously most important in the space of a public office. And we see many instances of this, like the Bill 21 in Quebec, where their headscarf ban, but again, it's not just that, it's also other religious and political symbols, isn't allowed for employees of public office. Like, I don't know. It's not my perception that I need an image of neutrality for my cashier at the drugstore. So that was interesting to me, because the court specifically says that this is specifically for when the employers need to present a neutral image towards customers or to prevent social disputes. Quote, however, the justification must correspond to a genuine need on the part of the employer, and in reconciling the rights and issues and interests at issue, the national courts may take into account the specific context of their member state, and in particular, more favorable national positions on the protection of freedom of religion. So
see, even if we are right, that here's the thing. In principle, a private company should be able to decide that, hey, if you, again, guys, I'm going to use code words because YouTube is sensitive about what we say, okay? If somebody comes with, like, a triple K member, okay? Triple K member, I hope you guys know what I'm saying. If they want to come out to work with their costume, and you're like, we don't want that here, a private company should be able to be like, we don't want that here, okay? So I'm not saying these are comparable, and they are comparable. I'm not saying these are the exact same things, but I'm just trying to make a point that the private company should be able to be like, this doesn't, we don't want you to be able to market your ideology here with what you're wearing, okay? However, it needs to be consistent. I understand that this might be a disguise, right? Like, a private company might be like, we just don't like women wearing with a hijab working here. We don't care about other symbols. Like, if a woman was working here with a cross, they wouldn't fire them, or like they wouldn't have an issue with a cross, right? Then, but all of a sudden, just seeing hijab, like, oh no, we're gonna know religious symbols. Okay, like, okay, we see what's happening here. Okay, so if that might be the case, but unless you can show that, you can't be like, just because it could be the case, therefore no private company should be able to tell what their employees, what symbols or philosophy or religious or politics they're advertising. Okay, maybe you could investigate, right? Maybe you could be like, the court's job is to be like, okay, if this is consistent, private companies should be able to not let their employees market politics or religion with their religious symbols. But at the same time, if somebody could prove that this is not about this law, it's not about religious symbols and political symbols as a whole, this is about this company being anti-Muslim women. If you can show that, then that should be, I think, in my opinion, at least, grounds for both suing and criminal, right? I think that's criminal, right? So if you could like show that this company had like people with, I don't know, religious symbols or with political symbols, or up until these hijabi women showed up, if you could show that, then you could be like, okay, this company has done something illegal, right? But unless you can, even if it's true, if you can't show that, then unfortunately law doesn't work based on fairness. Laws works based on what you can, it does work. It's based on what you can show. It can't be just based on what you can assume or what you just know in your heart or something. You know what I mean? Suze.
So it's interesting. For the special needs care center, they already had rules on the books that forbade Christians from wearing a cross. So
Say that
it's not,
again.
they already have rules on the books where, you know, like Christians can't wear like a cross necklace, like a crucifix.
Oh yeah.
Like it's
Okay.
not discrimination.
It settles it for me. Okay. You can't. Yeah. So where were people before that saying like, this is outrageous, this is discrimination? How come women can't wear a cross at work? Like, where was that? Right? This is Islamic privilege. Okay. Where was that? Right?
But what do you think
Can
about
you work? Can you? What's the cap? It's kippa, right?
kippa? Or
Kippa.
yeah.
Could people work at this company? Men could show up with a kippa. Could they have, or would that be not allowed?
My understanding is that would not be allowed.
Okay, so how come? Why is the outrage only when hijabi women can't work with the hijab there? This is, again, it's a form of Islamic privilege. This is not anti-Islamic discrimination. This is actually the exact opposite. This is Islamic privilege. If the information is correct, unless somebody comes and corrects us that, you know.
But what do you think about the actual positions that these women hold? I understand more with the child care center for mandating, you know, not showing political, philosophical, religious symbols. But for me, I understand the position of the woman who's just a cashier at a drugstore less so. To me, that doesn't seem like it's a position that mandates neutrality in the same way.
I understand.
I'm not a judge.
I know. Okay. See, here's the thing. That's a fair criticism. But if that's but if the complaint is that you don't need neutrality as a cashier, then the issue with this law is not religious discrimination. The issue with this law might be like, why do you need neutrality at the cashier? You know, why can't I? It's not like, why are you not allowing hijabi women at the cashier? It should be everybody. Why can't I have like my political affiliation also as a cashier? Okay. So if that's the nature of the complaint, then people shouldn't act like this is religious discrimination. The nature of the complaint should be like, you don't need neutrality at the cashier. That's a different kind of complaint about this law, separate from accusing them of religious discrimination, because they're not discriminating. They're being consistent.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to see if this has been either in the past or in the present or in the future applied inconsistently, because then you would have major grounds to come at this again. If this is being applied inconsistently, like there's someone with a little anarchy symbol on their little apron at work, you know, like then you would have grounds to be you'd have legal grounds. Like I'd completely support that. It was really interesting. Zara Kay had a post on her page where she was saying banning of religious symbols in workplaces isn't secularism, it's authoritarianism. When did we become like theocracies that are intolerant to other people's beliefs kept to themselves? I don't find the need to discriminate women who wear the hijab, but I certainly won't celebrate the hijab for what it represents in setting the narrative that my gender is subservient. I celebrate the courage of women who take it on, blah, blah, blah. Wait, anything else? Yeah, so
it amazes me that people don't see the difference between a government banning something and a private company having standards at their workplace, right? So this is not tyranny. In fact, it would be tyranny if what Zara Kay wants, that would be tyranny, okay? Because think about what it would involve. It would involve the government forcing the private companies to have the standards that the government wants, even if it's not discrimination, right? Again, I'm not against government intervention. If the government isn't getting involved and actively having laws against discrimination, those are good government intervention. But if this is not discrimination, this is being consistent, and the government steps in and says you can't do that, that's the government setting the standards of private companies for them, forcing it on them, even when it's not discrimination. That is actual tyranny. I don't know what people, how do people not understand the difference between something that the government is forcing upon you and something that is a private company is forcing upon you? If you are working for them, you are not forced to work for them. Okay? Again, if it's not discrimination, the private company should be able to have standards. You can't force private companies to act the way you want. That's the actual tyranny. Guys, this is not that hard. Here's the thing. If the government comes and says, we have a rule, you can't swear. I'm like, what the hell? Imagine if a government comes and says, like, you can't swear. That's illegal now. Like, this is too much government intervention. Like, what the hell? They're policing our words, okay? That would be tyranny. That would be unreasonable. However, if a private company comes and says, you can't swear at work. If you conduct this behavior at work, you will be fired. That is not tyranny. That is not tyranny. If I go to my office and start swearing like a sailor and they fire me, I can't claim like, oh my God, this is tyranny. That is not tyranny. How do people not see the difference?
Well, technically, you do swear at your office a lot. And I would know because we work together. Yeah, no.
Again, I mean, guys, I'm not just for the progressives out there. I'm not saying the government shouldn't intervene at all. The government should stay behind and not have no regulations at all. No, I'm not saying that. Okay. Again, government has to have anti-discrimination laws. But if this is consistent and it's not discrimination, it's consistent across all philosophical and political ideologies, then the government stepping in and saying you can't do that, that is actual tyranny. But go on.
Yeah, no, it'd be kind of ridiculous to say to private companies that they are not allowed to have a dress code or a uniform policy. But the Open Society Justice Initiative says that this ruling may continue to exclude many Muslim women and other religious minorities from various jobs in Europe. What do you say to that? That this is yeah.
I'm just wondering why there was not an issue about the Sikhs, for example, not being able to work, right, because of these rules, right? Why was this not an issue when Jewish people who had to wear the kippah, why was this not an issue? Like, oh my God, they can't work here because they always have to wear the kippah. They want to always wear the kippah. Sikh people, they always have to wear the turban. Oh no, they can't work here, right? They have to go find a job somewhere else. Why was this not an issue? Why is it that when the hijabi women want to work here and now they can't, okay? Why is it now an issue? Again, this is Islamic privilege, right? Is this not Islamic privilege? Again,
yes.
I'm not saying, again, if you have a problem, yeah, go on.
And I mean, to paraphrase the title of Yasmin Mohammed's book, like the kind of uneducated backlash about this is a good example of how Western liberals empower radical Islam. Like, it's in an effort that is very well-meaning to include minorities within society, integrate them, have them be supportive and thrive. I share that desire. But we shouldn't do this in a way where we are privileging some people more than others. We need to be consistent. And, you know, I think, yeah, it's an example of when your progressivism or your goodwill accidentally becomes illiberal.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying this law doesn't have these standards, not law. These standards don't have a problem. But I'm just saying that if they're being consistent, the problem with it is not religious discrimination. The problem with it is something else. Maybe it's a problem, okay? And again, I think the solution to things like this is you need to have, you know, there needs to be so many options. Like, for example, this company should have alternative jobs for this woman, for example, in my opinion, right? Like, let's say, like, okay, you said I'm qualified. Now you don't want me as a cashier. Can I do inventory? Right?
Yeah.
You don't need you don't need neutrality. You don't need neutrality for somebody who's doing inventory, right?
Yeah, it's not publicly facing. If it's not publicly facing, then you do not need to present an image of neutrality.
Right.
Perfect example, Armin.
Yeah. anyways, look at some comments in the live chat while I bring up the next.
Well, Music Guy had an interesting comment when we first started the news. I'll try to find the actual comment, but he was asking if this would. Oh wait, here it is. I can't wear a beard at work. Would that be the same? I don't think it would be the same because a beard is not explicitly a religious symbol. There are many religions that do heavily wearing the beard may be obligatory, but it is not obviously a religious symbol in the same way that a crucifix necklace or a hijab would be. Like when you see unless a man is also wearing like a Sikh turban, I don't assume, or like a little kufi hat, like I don't assume that his beard is a religious mandate or part of his religious expression. So I can see how it would be a lot easier for it to be a situation where the beard is fine. Unless it is a situation where it is actually a hazard to the job, like being a medical professional, you know, during the situation we got going now, you got to shave that down so that you can wear your protective equipment. Ghost Bunny is saying, I work for a Christian workplace and we can't even show religious preference, LOL. Interesting.
This one.
Ion is saying, Armin congratulating himself by highlighting the comments, which praises him. Yes, he does this every day. I don't know what you're talking about. This is new. This is nothing new.
Yeah. That's how you get highlighted, by the way, if you were wondering.
Hey guys, if you're a fan of Blasphemy and Sexy Callie, you know, like me, then you need to be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description below. Because if you subscribe, we will send you a free copy of our Blasphemous Art ebook. And let me tell you, it is the tastiest blasphemy that you can find anywhere available today. And we are so generous with our blasphemy that we continue to send you more blasphemy every week. So make sure to subscribe, link in the description below.